Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome to Chapter 3 of Book 1, Meridian. Last time, Sejana Lushale sent her shipmate, Ayadi Kailana, into the den of information broker Rook to determine if he has the information Caluvar Rin is looking to sell. At about the moment she's considering going after the pilot, Ayadi returns with news that Rin hasn't sold the comm logs yet. Sejana plans to stake out the office, waiting for either Rin to arrive or Rook to go meet him, and Ayadi stays to help out. Through a well-placed drone, they see Rook leaving through the rear entrance and fly off in a drift car. Following on a drift bike, Sejana and Ayadi trail him to a transport pod launch, where Rook buys a ticket to Overlook. They follow him up to the station where he enters the final jump, the most famous bar on the station. While Rook waits for Rin to arrive, Sejana and Ayadi watch. While chatting with some bar regulars, Ayadi is pointed to the nervous man who's come in the last day or two. Recognizing Rin, she sends a message to Sejana, who approaches the thief. She demands he turns over the data, but he recognizes her as a member of Falcon Squad and tells her that she saved his life on Centaura 4. Sejana stares at Caluvar Rin, as he has made this declaration that she saved his life on Centaura 4. And in a moment, she's cast back to that time. Chaos and weapons fire, plasma shots from Regular troops, and the screams of wounded Imperial soldiers. Sejana blinks and looks at Caluvar Rin closely. And let's ask the Oracle. Does she remember him? I think it's a small chance. So 10 or less on the percentile dice will be a yes. 19 is a no. Once again, closer than I thought it was going to be. But no, she does not recognize him. She furrows her brow and says, "You were on Centaura 4? And he nods and says, "Yeah, I was part of the 4th Legion. We were stationed there when the Regular struck, and we called in for support, and command sent Falcon Squad to help us out, and then we were ambushed, and it was a mess. How are you?" And she looks around, aware that Rook is still sitting in a corner of the bar, and that she is in this precarious position where he could discover them at any moment, and she needs to get Rin out of here. And so she says, "You're here to meet someone." At which point, Rin pales and says, "Yeah, I am." She nods and says, "That is not going to happen. You're going to come with me, and we're going to discuss what is going on. But we cannot stay here. Understood?" And she infuses in her voice a little bit of command. And he straightens a little bit and he says, "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "Good, come with me." She's going to grab his elbow and guide him out of the final jump. To do so, I think she's going to have to make another stealth roll to try to slip past Rook's careful gaze. And I think it's going to be a difficult check because Rook is on the lookout for Caluvar Rin. So she's going to have to guide him out without Rook seeing. So her stealth is, she has a skill level of 1 and a dexterity of 1. So it's a total of 2. So 2d6 plus 2. Here we go. 10 on the dice plus 2 is a 12. So that is a success. She and Rin are able to slip out the main entrance. Maybe there is a gaggle of people who are coming in, some workers coming off their shift, and they're jostling and chatting and laughing. And it creates enough of a distraction that Sejana and Rin are able to slip out of the final jump. Is Sejana just going to leave Ayati in there? I don't think so. So I think she sends Ayati back a message that is essentially, come meet us outside as quickly as you possibly can. And so Ayati's going to get up and make her way out. And I think she may have to make her own stealth roll to get out, because she is somebody that met with Rook, and he might recognize her and wonder why she's on the station just a couple hours after meeting with him. I am going to make this a routine check, which is a target number of 6, because Rook is not looking for her specifically. And having only met her once, it's possible that even if he looked at her and saw her leaving the final jump, he wouldn't necessarily recognize her. He might be like, oh, that person looks familiar, but wouldn't necessarily put 2 and 2 together that she was somebody that he had talked to that morning. So I'm going to roll this stealth, but Ayati does not have stealth. So she is untrained in this skill, which means she's going to take a -3 penalty. She's got to hit a target number of 6. Here we go. No, I rolled a 3 on the die. -3 is a 0. So that is an exceptional failure. And that is interesting. She's making her way out. As she's moving around the bar, she doesn't realize that Rook got up from his table and made his way to the bar to order maybe another drink or maybe some snacks or something like that. She walks right past him. And in that moment, Rook looks at her, recognizes her immediately, and says, Zira? And she keeps walking, because this is a pretty exceptional failure. And she keeps walking because she hears that word, but she kind of doesn't remember that she used that code name when she went into Rook's office. She's not thinking in those terms, and she's not a spy. She's not, an operative. She's not somebody who is trained to keep a cover identity present when they're on an operation. And so she just keeps walking. And I think Rook, seeing her in the place where he's supposed to meet the person who he's going to buy the information that she was asking after, it triggers his curiosity. It triggers maybe some sense of warning. And so he is going to start to follow her out of the final jump. Outside the final jump, Sejana and Rin are standing off to the side. Sejana is watching the exit, waiting for Ayati to emerge, and she has her hand firmly grasping Rin's elbow so that he can't slip away from her. For his part, Rin is being very still. I think he's not entirely sure what's going to happen, but I think he has some weird trust that because this person that he's run into is a member of Falcon Squad and somebody that he has idolized as somebody who saved his life years and years ago, he feels safe in her presence. And so the two of them are waiting for Ayati to emerge. And Ayati steps out from the final jump. And at that point, right behind her, Rook emerges. I'm not going to roll a recon for Sejana because I think she's watching the door. She knows what Rook looks like, and she would immediately notice him. There's no danger of that. So maybe the most important question here is, does Rook know what Rin looks like? Because thinking about it, if Rin is paranoid about trying to sell this information to somebody, but also is worried about being tracked and traced and captured and being found out, it is possible that he wouldn't have communicated with Rook visually. Like, it might have been the sort of meetup where Rin was supposed to find Rook and not the other way round. So I'm going to say it's 50-50 on whether or not Rook knows what Rin looks like. So let's roll our percentile dice. If I got a 50 or less, and I got a 52, which is a no. So Rook has no idea what Rin looks like. Does he recognize Sejana? I think that is unlikely. because she is wearing sort of a disguise and she's in the company of someone else. So I'm going to say it's unlikely, which would be 25 or less is a yes. So I rolled a 39. That is another no. So he walks out. This is interesting because he sees Ayati, who he knows as Zira, walk out of the final jump. As he's exiting, he sees these two people kind of standing off to the side, waiting, but he doesn't really register them as anything. And so he reaches forward and grabs Ayati on the shoulder and kind of pulls her around. And he's like, Zira? Zira, right? And she turns and looks at him and kind of blinks. And she's like, oh, what are you doing? And then she sees him and goes, oh, hi, Rook. Hi, how are you? And he says, it's Zira, right? Yeah, Zira, right. She's like, what are you doing here? What do you mean? What am I doing here? It's a bar. I was getting a drink. But you just met with me in my office a few hours ago. And why would you be here? Ayati kind of is looking around a little wide-eyed, and I think Sejana, who is still standing aside with Rin, is not going to take any action. I think she's going to watch and see what happens to try and not blow her own cover. And so Ayati kind of like looks over towards Sejana, and Sejana just imperceptibly shakes her head. And Ayati looks back to Rook and says, I don't understand the question. I'm just here getting a drink. Yes, but why here? Why did you come down and see me and then come back here? Why are you here at the final jump? Look, man, I just came down to this planet to ask about some information, and then I came back here. I live on and work on Overlook. Why are you asking me all these questions? It's none of your business why I'm here. So we're going to roll a deception check again for Ayati. It's an average check. And again, she does not have any deception. So I think she is going to take a -3 to this, but she's going to get a +1 from her social once again. So it's a net -2 on this roll. She's got to beat an 8. Dice have turned cold. So I got another 3 on the dice. -2 is a 1, which is an exceptional failure. And I think at that point, she's not selling the lie. Rook steps forward and grabs hold of her pilot's jumpsuit and drags her in close. And he says, why are you here? Are you here to try and steal my information? Trying to hijack my meeting with my informant? Is that what this is? Do you work for Kasek? Who are you? And he's getting really, really close in, and Ayati, her eyes are wide. At this point, Sejana turns to Rin and says, don't move, or I will find you. And Rin's like, that's the guy I was supposed to meet. I know. You and I have a lot to discuss, so stay here and do nothing. Okay. She is going to let go of his elbow, and she's going to turn and start stalking towards these two. Ayati is a pilot, but she wasn't always a pilot. She has some other training as well. And so I think she is going to try and break free from this grapple that Rook has placed her in. So she is going to use her melee skill. For this, she's going to use dexterity. She has a 0 level in melee, so she's got a +2 though from dexterity. She's going to try and bring her arm up and over and kind of weed it in between Rook's hands and then do a quick knee drop twist to break free. This is 2d6 +2, an average check on this. 9 on the dice +2 is 11. So she does that and breaks free from his grasp. At which point, Sejana steps up behind him And with her gauntleted fist, she's going to clock him over the back of the head. And she's going to get a +1 from her melee on this. 2d6. I think this is going to be a routine check. This is a 6+ because Rook is not really aware that she's there. He's focused on Ayati. And so she's got to beat a 6 here. 7 on the dice, +1 is an 8. So Sejana steps up behind him and clocks him across the back of the head, and Rook stumbles forward and hits the ground. At which point we should ask the question, is that enough to knock Rook unconscious? I'm going to say it is 50-50. 27 is a yes. So Rook sprawls out in front of them and is unconscious. Now, they're in the middle of this pretty major thoroughfare on Overlook. So there are a bunch of people around, and they're murmuring and pointing, and, you know, one person's like, hey, what's going on over here? And starts like moving in their direction. Sejana ignores all of that, and she just reaches down and grabs Ayati, brings her up to her feet, and says, come on, let's go. And is going to turn and start walking away with Ayati in tow. Did Caluvar Rin, seeing all this and kind of putting things together, is he going to stay put or is he going to run? I think it's a small chance that he runs, but if I get a 10 or less on my percentile dice, he's going to run. 34 is a no, so he is still standing right where she left him, eyes wide. She marches over and grabs him and says, all right, you two, come with me. And they are going to head back towards the pods. Now, she just knocks somebody unconscious in the middle of the thoroughfare, and Overlook certainly has its own security forces. So are they active enough and fast enough that they are going to stop her before she can make it to the drop pods to go back down to Davensheer? I think it's likely. I think the security here is pretty solid. So we're going to roll 75 or less is a yes. 87 is a no. Okay, so maybe there aren't as many security officers here in this area right at this moment. The final jump gets more of a contingent of the security officers later in the evening, and so maybe this is right around a shift change. There are a few officers on the level right now, but they're occupied with other things. And so Sejana, Ayati, and Caluvar Rin arrive at the transport pods. Sejana pays for passage for the three of them. They board the transport pod, and they begin to make their way down to Davensheer. Sejana leads Rin and Ayati to a back corner. As they're walking, she looks over at Ayati and says, are you all right? Yeah, I'm all right. I just, well, I couldn't sell it. It's all right. You were caught in a surprising situation, and you handled yourself well. I'm impressed. Well, thanks, Luciel. I really appreciate that. I wish I'd done a little bit better. Didn't have to come to blows, but, well, I guess you can't win them all, huh? That's right. But you walked away. That's what matters. Now, as for you, you have the data? Yes, I have it. Look, I don't know what's going on. But I was going to sell this data to that guy. He's an information broker. I was going to sell it to him because GenCorp's got problems. GenCorp hired me to get the data back. That's what matters to me. So hand it over. Then we can talk. Rin looks around and I think maybe is starting to realize that there's no escape for him here, and that maybe Sejana's not the sympathetic ear that he was hoping for. He looks over at Ayati, and Ayati just kind of half smiles and shrugs at him, and he goes, okay. Here, and he reaches into his coat and he pulls out a small data strip, and he holds it up and he says, here it is. These are all the comm logs, and hands them over. Sejana takes them and secretes them within her own coat. And then she says, all right, now that that little piece of business is done, you may talk. Why did you steal this from GenCorp? Rin says, okay, so GenCorp is the main producer of N-L-mycin, which is used to treat jump sickness. Yes, I'm aware. We've all taken it. Right, and it works. We've all seen that. When jump sickness happens, it works. Well, I was working for them as an analyst, and some reports came across my desk that just didn't add up. They weren't making sense. So I went to my supervisor and I asked them about it. And they told me not to worry about it and transferred me to a different project. Well, that didn't seem right to me. Why would they transfer me to a different project if there was nothing wrong with those reports? So I did a little bit more digging. And I found out that the comm logs show that there are fundamental errors in this most recent batch of N-L-mycin. If it goes out in distribution, it's not going to help people with their jump sickness. It's going to make it worse. People are going to get sick and maybe could die. So I tried sending an anonymous report to the high-level executives of GenCorp, telling them of this. And you know what happened? There was an internal investigation hunting for whoever leaked the comm logs. Yeah, how did you know? That's how they always do it. Of course, the executives knew. Sejana sighs and looks away. Ayadi is mortified, and she says, well, we can't let them get away with that. And Rin points at her and says, exactly. That's why I stole the logs. That's why I fled from Branghold and came here to Davensheer. I wanted to find somebody that I could get those logs to who would do something about it. But all of the media that I contacted, they wanted too much information. They wanted me to go out on the quick and talk about it. And look, I don't want to be that kind of whistleblower. Like I don't want to be the face of this campaign against a corporation. I just want them to stop. I want things to be better, but I don't want to be the face of that. I don't want to be in the crosshairs. I found this info broker, Rook, and talked to him, and he said he would buy it from me and then he would disseminate it to a whole bunch of people, including GenCorp's rivals, and that they would take them down from the outside. And so I set up a meeting, and you knocked him unconscious. Why did you knock him unconscious? Don't worry about that. It's an old grudge between us. Rin sort of shrugs and says, oh, okay, well, will you help me get this information out? Because somebody needs to know. GenCorp needs to be stopped. Like, that new batch of N-L-mycin can't go out. It'll hurt people. Sejana sits back in her seat and says, I don't know. I need time to think. Ayadi looks at Rin and kind of gives him an encouraging smile and then leans over and says, Luciel, we can't let them get away with this. You and I both know that there are people who need N-L-mycin every time they jump. And if it's going to hurt them, and now we know about it, like, we can't let that go. Sejana looks at her and says, now's not the time to discuss it. Let's discuss it once we get back to the ship. What's there to discuss? Ayadi, there are layers upon layers of information and detail here that we don't know. If we act without consideration, it could mean a lot more people get hurt. Whatever, this is your world, but we are going to talk about this. Of course. Now both of you sit back and please be quiet. I have thinking I need to do. And Sejana is going to take the data strip, she's going to attach it to her queue, and she's going to listen through the comm logs herself and try to glean as much information from them as she possibly can. The flight down to the planet is uneventful, and Sejana listens through the comm logs 2 or 3 times during the transit, and she comes to the same conclusion that Caluvar Rin did. GenCorp knowingly has production issues with their most recent batch of this drug. And instead of doing something about it and trying to correct it, the executives have buried the information and are in the process of trying to set up further distribution to disseminate it far enough away from Cassida that reports of the problems that it causes won't come back. They get back to the planet's surface, and the 3 of them disembark. Sejana turns to Ayati and says, "Can you take my bike back? All 3 of us won't fit on it, and I have to stay with Rin." "All right, but we are going to talk about this more, right?" "Of course." "All right." So she's going to head for the drift bike and get on board and fly it back to the Howlin' Wolf. Sejana turns to Rin and says, "All right, Rin, come with me." And the 2 of them are going to head out of this transport pod launch pad and down to the street level. And they're going to walk a few blocks to pick up the public rail that runs through Davensheer. As they're walking, Caluvar Rin says, Can I ask a question?" Sejana says, "Go ahead." He says, "Did I do the wrong thing? Should I have just let it go? Because it certainly seems like you're not going to help me. And, I mean, you were a part of Falcon Squad. You were the best of the best, and if you're not going to help me get this information out there, I kind of feel like maybe I messed up. I ruined my life for nothing. Please tell me I didn't mess up my life for nothing. Please tell me we're going to do something about this and we're going to make the world a better place. We're going to hold GenCorp accountable." Sejana looks over at him and says, "Things have changed a lot since Centaura 4. We have to find a way to survive. And the corporations, they are so powerful. Almost like little nations themselves, wielding private armies, steamrolling over anyone who gets in their way. I'm not part of Falcon Squad anymore because there is no Falcon Squad. There's no Legion, there's no Imperial military. We are just motes of dust floating in the deep." Rin's shoulders slump, and he says, "When you put it that way, it makes you wonder what's the point. Why should we even try?" Sejana inhales a deep breath, slowly lets it out, an almost meditative experience. And she says, "You didn't do the wrong thing, Caluvar. Far from it, in fact. It's just harder and harder to do the right thing these days, and stay alive. I've spent a long time trying to stay alive, and I've done a lot of work for the corporations because who do you think is paying these days? Liars used to be subsidized from the Imperial coffers, but now we're just mercenaries, taking pay from whoever has the rue. And unfortunately, corporations like GenCorp are the ones who have the rue. Are you going to turn me over to them too with the data?" Sejana says, "I'm still thinking." They board the rail and it rockets through Davensheer, heading towards the Heraclean interstellar spaceport. They disembark from the rail and board a tram that takes them within the starport to the docking bay where the Howlin' Wolf is located. As they emerge and head towards the door that leads into the private docking bay, Rin says, "Look, I understand if you have to turn me over. I really would like to not become a martyr of this whole mess. I was just trying to do the right thing. But if you're telling me that we can't do the right thing anymore because it's dangerous and because we just have to be out for survival, I guess I can't blame you for that. It's a different universe than it used to be." "Yes, it is." They reach the door and it slides open, and Sejana and Rin step through. Immediately, the two of them stop and look, as there are 3 figures in black armor waiting by the boarding ramp to the Howlin' Wolf. Rin takes one look at them and says, "Oh shit, oh, you already called them?" And Sejana shakes her head and says, No, I didn't. Stay calm. We can get through this." "Okay, please just don't turn me over to them. They look scary." The two of them walk forward, and one of these 3 figures in black armor steps forward and says, "You the liar, Lushale?" "I am. And you are?" "Doesn't matter who I am. Looks like you are able to fulfill your contract. I'll take over from here." "I'm not ready to fulfill my contract yet." He cocks his head a little bit and says, "This is highly irregular, Lushale. Hand over Caluvar Rin and the data, or I'll take it from you." A ghost of a smile crosses her face as her left hand brushes against the Technomancer mask, magnetized to her left thigh. And she says, "There's no need to be uncivil. Especially not here, in my home. Look, I don't want this to get ugly, but if you don't turn over Rin and the data, then I'm going to have to take it from you. Those are my orders. Now give it to me." Sejana turns and looks at Rin and back to the armored man. And she says, "You know, I don't think I will." Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or support me on Patreon at patreon.com/errantadventures. You can also buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on all the socials is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the deep, liars.